Madam Chair.
Call meeting, Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Hopefully you all had a chance to read the minutes. They're long, so going through them. Did have one little typo that I found next to the very last page.
Under paragraph 6.
The next to the last page there under Smith asked.
If that would work, a dispensary.
Yeah.
And Smith, I assume that's as a dispensary?
Either as or for a dispensary, but I would say it's a dispensary.
As a, okay, I've got that noted.
Do I have a motion to approve minutes of the February 12th Planning and Zoning Commission minutes?
I wasn't here.
Okay.
So,
Second. And we have one correction which was made. First, second, motion, or we don't need a motion for this. Just all in favor of,
it's a voice vote, yes. All in favor, say aye. All
say
in,
aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay?
I abstain. So it's weird.
Abstain? Hearing none, the minutes have passed for the February 12th meeting. We have one lonely person in the audience tonight for all of those. Do not identify him. This is my husband, Dan.
There's a lot of chairs. I thought we got a lot of people here.
So, we might have some.
yeah.
I had the Girl Scouts here, so we had a lot of extra chairs.
Nobody wants to do that. That's okay. It gives us time to go through things a little better. So, staff reports, Mr. Hendricks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Residential construction is very slow so far this year. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but we've had bad weather since January 1st. We've had a total of 5 single-family home permits. A whole lot of folks wanting to start, but they don't want to plant their equipment in the ground. They want to plant the houses, so they're going to wait. It's too wet. It was frozen forever, now it's too wet. So we're only at 5 of those. We have received our first review related to a site plan up on the Smithville Marketplace. Several questions posed back to the architect on that one to get some things clarified to make sure it currently does not meet the standards of the site plan approval that this board granted some time ago as it relates to a couple of issues. If they're able to bring that portion into compliance, we'll move forward. If you recall, that subdivision has a conceptual plan overlay district that included the site plan approval related to it. 2 minor issues. We'll have them worked out here shortly.
Does that have to come back through?
No, as long as they meet what you approved then no. If they want to change it, yes, they have to come back. I don't think they will. It's just a matter of an oversight, I think. We'll see. This arrived on Friday at about 4 o'clock via email, and I did a cursory, okay, thanks, I'll have to take a look at some stuff, so we'll get that out. Also anticipate issuing the infrastructure permit for all that work for the marketplace in the next couple of weeks. Just got the last bit of information from them today. Yesterday. So that is how we'll value the permit cost. We're currently evaluating to make sure their reasonable estimate of cost is accurate. Once we get that completed, we'll issue a permit invoice for the infrastructure work, and that will start breaking ground. Again, up there, Same scenario, it's just mud. A week ago, we had frost as much as 24 inches deep in the ground frozen, so it wouldn't have been good to dig then anyway. Now that frost has come up to 10 to 12 inches in a lot of the areas, but the rest of it's just 100% mud. So I'm hopeful that they wait until they get it dried out a bit, because there's a lot of demo up at the front of that marketplace project first, the sign. There's some curb in there that was never installed in the right location. Stormwater work that was done in the wrong locations up front. They got to tear all that out, and then they'll start working on the water, the sewer, and the stormwater work. MoDOT will handle the MoDOT portion of that work, and we'll see where we go from there. Other construction is obviously kind of slowed down with the same construction stuff. We are anticipating the potential completion of the paving on streetscape, including the top, by mid-April, well in advance of when they have to have it done. Once again, it's weather.
Light poles are good.
Yeah. Light poles are going up. There are 13 standing now, 9 of which are illuminated. By the end of the week, they're hoping to have Bridge Street, both north and south, and the rest of Main to commercial, all lit up, and then they're going to start working this direction. So that's all we've got from a staff report.
Are all the sidewalks in that?
There are 17 feet of a ramp down there at the very end fairway they had to wait on to get the curb redone. They poured everything but the curb today. So
So now Trina can walk down Main Street and stuff.
she'll have to walk down fairway to get there.
Man, that's a little rough. I know. You walk on the new sidewalk instead of this one.
Yeah, it'll be by mid-April. Everything should be clean and clear, including the sod or the seed for the grass areas down that way. There's more concrete to be poured, but it's not sidewalk. They're the paver areas around all of the light poles west of Mill Street. There will have a 8-foot pad from sidewalk to the curb, and they'll have brick pavers in it to highlight that area. And then the rest will be grass, plus other vegetation and various, but mostly grass. I couldn't hear you.
ADA approved pavers.
Yeah, yes. To the extent that it's not part of the ADA path, it's not really a concern. It was more of a look, because you can't really access the paver area there because you have to step up 6 inches to get to the curb.
The rest of it's grass.
The area where the sidewalks all went in, up around Harborview and up around
Mhm.
here, are they
Yeah.
going to seed that?
Yes.
It is really washed
Yep.
a lot.
They were notified that they needed to get on it soon. They're going to hydroseed, which is they spray the mulch, the fertilizer, and the seed out all at once. There are a couple areas there they have to put special fabric blankets down to hold the ground. They'll probably have to go back up and do a little cleanup. But that hydroseeding needs to have the weather. If they could have got it in November before super frost, they could have got it. But yeah,
Remember, we had snow last week.
yeah.
It's still melting out there.
Yeah. I anticipate because that's literally the only thing left for them to do before they get their final check, including the 5% withholding that we do on all projects. So as soon as that's done, they'll submit their final bill and want the last of that.
Any other questions for?
Okay, move on. Next thing on the agenda is for us to talk about the medical marijuana zoning districts. The recommendation that's been made, once a week, you have to fill out a card.
I'm smart enough to know when
Yeah.
So, okay, so Jack sent sent out the staff report on this. Hopefully you guys have had a chance to review a little bit. I will tell you, in reviewing that and all of this, it was a little confusing to me, so I am going to ask Jack to kind of go over it for us, review it a little bit, because there were still a lot of questions that I had.
Sure.
So, Jack, I'm going to turn it back to you and let you go over this with us.
Sure, and I'm going to go over it in a fashion that'll hopefully give you the ability to make the decisions you need to make. Starting from the beginning, right now, in our current ordinances, based upon our interpretation, the standard interpretation of the language, a dispensary facility is allowed in the B1, B2, B3, because it's a drugstore for all intents and purposes. For the biggest part of the use, it has different impacts associated with it. So unless we add a provision of some type related to medical marijuana facilities, it can go in B1, B2, and B3. Obviously, the 1,000-foot restriction would still apply, but the zoning portion would allow that. If we add the definitions that we unanimously, everybody said add the definitions. If we add the definitions in and then use those definitions in a use, then they don't meet a drugstore definition. They have their own separate definition, and they can't go into B1, B2, and B3 as a drugstore. Drugstores are not allowed in the B4 downtown, so that becomes moot no matter what. And then the other aspect of it is the uses that we do not have a significantly tied together interpretation that would allow them to happen would be the medical marijuana manufacturing, the infused products manufacturing, or the cultivation sites. We don't really have something that's accurate for that, which is why the suggestion is industrial on that. So we have 4 types of facilities. There's the dispensary, the retail outlet, the only portion of it that would generate taxes are the dispensary. Then you have the cultivation facilities that can be indoor or outdoor. You have the infused products manufacturing facilities, which are obviously indoor. And then you have the testing facilities. Latest information I've heard is the state estimates there will be 2 testing facilities in the entire state. So very limited in those, although I think that there can be more. The drive for that is limited. So we have for us, although we have to put testing in case somebody wants to do a testing, because we have a provision related to testing that could go into some of the other districts. If we use those definitions, then everything's covered. The conversation, and it was kind of evenly split at the last meeting, was to bring forth an ordinance draft with 2 options. And it took me a while to figure out the easiest way to do it. I've given that to you in this document. It has option as its base option, and you'll see the highlighted or italicized and underlined provisions would be the portions that needed to be added to 400.165, paragraph 7, and 180, paragraph 7. And it obviously includes the first section, which is the definitions. But those sections would put medical marijuana dispensary in B3, and all the other facilities in I1. However, if you look at the of the ordinance, it'd be page 1, 2, 3, top of page 4, you'll see paragraph 3. That's the 25% gross floor area that we talked about. If there is a B3 provision included in the ordinance so that it can be done in B3 or the dispensaries could go into I1, but they would have a 25% gross floor area of the building limitation because they are considered retail activities in the I1 district. We had that discussion as well. That was one draft. The other one would be not in B3, and there was concern about what that would do to the 25% language. So what I've done on the very last page of the ordinance is alternate option with all of it in I-1. And the wording in there, the first part is just descriptions of what would happen. The number 7 paragraph that's underlined and italicized is identical to the previous one in I-1, except it includes medical marijuana dispensary facilities. That placement in that definition would mean the 25% prohibition goes away because it is specifically authorized in the district. So you have two options. If you want the I-1 only, then you would have to amend the draft ordinance, indicate in the vote that the alternate provision 1 be the provisions that go in. Otherwise, the base draft you don't have to change yet. Less work on my part to do it in this direction. Don't have a preference, B1, B3, or B3, I1, that's ultimately to you, but from a drafting standpoint, it was easier to make the alternate, just add that paragraph and delete the other stuff instead of try to add it all in later. So that, I think, covers it. The only other issue in this week's staff report relates to the 25% limitation of retail activities. At last month's meeting, I never got to the point logically in my mind to explain that provision as to why there's a 25% cap. And that is generally the traffic conflicts with industrial type businesses and retail type businesses. That's the general reason for those provisions. If you have any other questions, I hope to be able to answer them. Otherwise, I think that lays out where you sit, based upon everything I gleaned from the last meeting.
So, before we get started on our discussion, we need a motion to approve this, or what?
That would be the ultimate, Robert's Rules method would be a motion and a second to approve the ordinance as drafted, and then through the discussion, an amendment can occur. It has to be seconded, then the vote on the amendment, all that, so.
But how can we make a motion if we don't know which option we want?
No, we're in the process.
Yeah, you make the motion and second, that then puts something on the table to discuss. Robert's Rules standard is put the thing on the, what you're going to be voting on the table, and then begin the discussion. During the discussion, if somebody wants to make a motion to amend, then you make the motion to amend, there's a second to motion to amend, and you discuss the amendment.
If no one seconds, it's dead on the line.
Right,
No vote.
right.
So I move to approve or discuss an ordinance amending section of chapter 100 of the zoning code relating to medical marijuana facilities.
Do I have a second?
Now you can open it for discussion, Madam Chairman, and no holds barred.
Open for discussion, questions, concerns. Jack, thank you. I thought you
Sure.
did a good job of explaining that a little better, because I know I was having trouble.
So was I. That was a long meeting.
When I was looking through it, and a lot of it is because it is written exactly the same, except for maybe one little thing. So that did help. I think also it helped a little bit. Anybody, have a question on it for the 25%? Is basically because in an industrial area, we do have big trucks, warehousing, things, and so, it is a concern for them to have retail traffic, right there with it, which I hadn't thought totally about that either.
The removing the 25% provision opens up our I-1 for big box retail, which we have limited I-1. And if we drop a Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, we have limited I-1, we have a traffic nightmare.
So you're saying that Lowe's or something like that would be in I-1 or?
They would be allowed for a 25% restriction.
Okay, if we remove it, okay.
Any retail would be allowed.
So
Right, because if you look at Commercial Street next to Garrison Dental and Sonic, that intersection, imagine a big box store behind Sonic. What would that look like traffic-wise? Getting in and out of Delta Chain, getting in and out of Sonic, getting in and out of McDonald's. The likelihood of one of those stores coming in over a dispensary is higher probability, based on the size of Sam's congressional district, and which contains Maryville, St. Joe, Hannibal, Chillicothe, all these bigger cities on highways. The odds of us getting multiple dispensaries is pretty low. In my opinion. Sorry, I was looking last time. I wasn't just sitting out there.
So, if I'm understanding this correctly, if you go to the alternate lady with medical marijuana, again, I1, then,
We're removing the 25%.
Well, actually, we crafted it to prohibit what the mayor's biggest concern is. It would then be, you could have as big a medical marijuana facility as you wanted, but it wouldn't. At the meeting, there was a lot of discussion of potentially getting rid of the 25% provision. This is a way to avoid that. It does allow medical marijuana facilities to go into I-1, but there wouldn't be. They could do a 10,000 square foot building the size of the library and just have the retail traffic in it.
But it doesn't open it up for Lowe's or something like that, does it? 'Cause it doesn't
Potentially
give-
could, if they came in and said, this is,
Right, and that's,
Have to be a medical marijuana dispensary.
yeah, but if you're putting, if you're gonna allow one business type to do 20,000 square feet of retail and this I-1 and not the other, as a business owner, bringing you come in and say, that's not fair.
yeah.
Right, you could come in and make an argument and say, that's not fair, I should be able to put retail in this as well.
And ultimately, my goal in getting this stuff drafted is to do it in a fashion that the mayor's concern we don't get sued. If we do, no matter what happens, cities never fare well in it because it costs money.
okay.
Those suits.
But also, just making sense of where to put things,
And-
you already
right.
have zoning for light industrial.
Right.
You already have zoning for agriculture, you already have zoning for business retail. So.
And I think the critical element is not what putting one of these facilities in I-1 does. It may protect residential, or it may, but the question is, what does it do to the desirability of the industrial land?
And the other thing.
That's the risk, because we only have.
What it does to the integrity of the residential areas too, though.
Right, oh yeah, no, I think that's important. That's why I think if you have it in industrial, you get that protection. If you put the drugstore portion in it, it makes the industrial less valuable, less likely to have industry come in.
Okay, does your alternative all in I-1, does that address the mayor's concerns?
No.
Well,
It does not.
in part it does. It's not a guarantee. My concern is what the mayor indicated, the legal ramifications if somebody says this is unfair, and then we get into that battle. Yeah.
So what can we do to put everything in I-1 and rectify the concerns that the mayor has?
Leave it at 25%.
Yeah, well, that maybe don't allow full retail, and then we look at what the ordinance is as written. The other thing, if you look at B3 as it is today, the likelihood of any of these other services coming into B3 are more likely than a dispensary. And we have B3 behind us. What's it? Yeah, it's everywhere. I don't want trash services, truck washing services, telecom towers, teleports, persons, music parks, food car tracks, mobile vehicle racetracks, don't drive your into my backyard either, but it's allowed. So, a facility that's open 8 to 5, generating tax dollars, highly secure, no difference than putting in a smaller Walgreens, in my opinion. We're not going to allow sign in generally marijuana leaves, that's,
Now, if the concern is that maybe someday possibly, recreational may people,
we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
We would have to-
That's my approach, but if
Yeah.
if we're thinking, if we're making decisions based on assumptions that might be someday, to me, it makes the most sense to go ahead and allow the retail dispensaries and be free as long as they're in that 1,000-foot range from the places that are concerned as subjectable. I would be willing to do away with that myself, but.
And I will clarify that concern, based upon my conversations with regional people, other cities, in that discussion, that is a concern that a lot of folks have, that what happens when? By using the definitions that we're using, we're not including those, for recreational if it comes around in 3 to 5 or 15 or whatever years. And that would then allow us, at that time, it would be another vote, most likely of the people, to put those restrictions like we do on payday loans. Those type of restrictions. Right. Liquor stores were a little, because we have an extra layer of that, they've got a separate license, but from where they go, we do have the ability, in current iteration of the law, to treat it just like an adult entertainment business or a payday loan or a pawn shop. All of those businesses, we have currently specific extra provisions, what you can do, what you can't do, how close they can be to each other and to every other facility.
And this language is very specific to medical marijuana, every law uses that.
Right. The other aspect of it is, we are capped at 1,000 feet. We can't say they can be farther away than 1,000 feet from any of those facilities because that's the maximum allowed. But on other facilities, we have the ability to make it much wider. And in some of them we do. So,
Yeah, I don't recommend reducing it at all.
yeah. Because you can theoretically limit it to one pawn shop or payday loan.
One thing I just want to remind this board of is we are recommending that this would still have to go through 2 readings of our board.
Yeah.
So spending a ton of time on this, as a recommending board, vote the way you're going to vote, it's just going to go, it has to go through twice, so we may have a lot of public comment show up at those meetings, and you've got 6 people that are voting on it twice. So, a lot can change once it gets to the board level.
Well, and that's, and I want to highlight something that the mayor didn't say, but he implied, and that is, as we've been, this meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission was one of the first that went out on Facebook Live or FaceTime, whatever it's called. It was one of the first ones we started that process on. And then it went to all the other stuff. The Board of Aldermen and their meetings are much more closely followed. Everybody watches them. So the concern about what the public thinks, we've tried to get the word out. The word's going to get out as far as it goes until it hits the Board of Aldermen. Then fortunately or not, if there's a recommendation out of tonight, next week's meeting will be standing room only.
Now, if we're building storage units, we have 50 people.
Yeah. Right. But those folks got a personal letter from us. So in this scenario,
This one got a
right.
letter on something would be different.
Well, and I think Shirley and Rand can attest in 13 and 14 when we were doing the entire discussion of the zoning ordinance, it was crickets in here while we did that discussion, and we advertised it. I think every quarter we advertised. Oh, by the way, we're still talking. So rarely had any public comment ever. So when you're talking about that aspect of it, but once it went to the board, then we had more people show up, even then. So keep in mind, if this goes to the meeting next week, it'll be busy in here.
And I do appreciate that, Mayor Bullock, but, on the same token, I appreciate the fact that it takes the pressure off us little bit, to be honest. But yet, I want to do our due diligence also. And this committee is looking at the zoning, and we have a comprehensive plan we put a lot of time into, so that as we looked to the future of the city, we were trying to make things to be put in the right places and the right spots, and helping in that direction. And so I do want us to take our due diligence in doing that.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should take, but the one thing I hear a lot of this is planning and zoning asset, it's done, it's not.
Yes. And I guess with that, Melissa, you know, you're on the other end, and you do get to hear a lot of that. Do you have some comments, concerns?
I haven't heard a lot from other individuals. I think it's like Jack said, that's probably not going to happen until action goes before the board, in all honesty.
That's
I know
when,
one thing I do research.
In all honesty, I mean, I think here with my problems
Right.
and my concerns, that ultimately it will be what happens after the board.
And I have done some research and looking at, Colorado and places that have these. And one of the things that I see is that, and I know I read something from Colorado on that, when these facilities go in, whether it's a dispensary or manufacturing or whatever it is, the land around it becomes very valuable because of the fact that this is a money-making business. It's a money-making business, so therefore then, the value of things go up, which is good and bad, is what they were saying, is what I was reading. It's good in a lot of ways for your city, but also then it makes it so valuable or so high that a lot of your other people can't come in, or your smaller businesses get thrown out. They can't afford it any longer. So it's kind of two-edged there.
The thing is, we can't speculate on how the lottery's going to shake out, who gets permits where, and what site's going to occur either. It's very limited. What's the count per district for?
24 is they have to issue 24 per permit. There's 192 divided equally between the districts. The U.S. congressional districts gets 24 in each. I've heard that there's a chance they may eventually allow more. The number of pre-applications far exceeds all aspects of what they've got out there in the minimums that are required. On dispensary, on grow, on everything. A lot of interest in the facility.
Our congressional district covers part of the airport, right?
Yes.
Part of the state.
Yep. It basically is, Flatwoods, that direction, then it goes all the way to Iowa, almost to Illinois, and cuts down through that direction.
Hannibal office, St. Joe office.
Hannibal, Kirksville, all those towns are in it too.
And it goes down to Lake Summit.
Yep. And it kicks down through there as well.
I would see them looking at putting in those high traffic areas before we see 24 metropolis.
Yeah. Well, the other aspect of it is, keep in mind, I didn't mention it, but it's sitting behind all the oranges areas that it can't go.
Right. And everything that's along the lake that's not in purple or green, that is federal land, it definitely can't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it won't be going out that direction.
What's the blue?
This is actually,
That's our water.
it's a water master plan map, so you have the south zone, the center zone, and the north zone.
Yes, you're way down there. Or Kansas City, that's 134th Street at the bottom of the blue.
Yeah, we've got 132nd down here, 134th here, 136th, then Amory. This is the current I-1 area we have, and then there's a tiny portion on the backside of these here.
Okay, remind me again of what the orange represents.
1,000-foot circles based upon rough estimates of where they're at.
That's our churches, schools, and
Churches, schools, and daycares. Yeah. And we've requested that the state have a specific definition in their provision as to the distance of 1,000 feet and how it's measured.
Like from property line to property, from the north property
I
line
don't,
to-
from my perspective, I don't want us to be required to define it, because then ultimately we're setting ourselves up for a lawsuit, because if somebody else defines it differently, it's a constitutional provision. It means one thing, they've got to tell us what it means.
Because it could be the center of the property, or it could be the.
Front door to front door, whatever, and ultimately, that, so that 1,000 foot, we've put in that specific request. I sent that email to the state. Hey, you guys need to define this. I don't want to know, I don't want us having to do it, and then Kearney or Platte City does a different definition, and one or both of us get sued because one of us is wrong. It only means one thing. It doesn't, 1,000 foot means 1,000 foot. They have to define what that is, so.
Let me just put some thoughts out there. So you're saying the little orange dots out there are 1,000 foot. So anything with around that is relatively safe for the dispensary if they don't want it.
It's not allowed by the Constitution.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, so if we were to adopt the alternative all in I-1, so, yeah, that would protect B3 in the neighborhoods, but then it would put other businesses at risk in the industrial area, is that what I'm understanding?
Well, I don't know, the at-risk, what it may very well do is change the value and use of industrial property.
But wouldn't it also change the value of the B3 property and maybe be just as destructive in some ways? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm trying to wrap
Yes,
my head around this. It's kind of hard.
The type of business traffic that you have in I versus B are generally different types of traffic. So if you have the B traffic in I, it's a lot more small cars, a lot more that kind of retail traffic that you see at a shopping center versus the Ford plant. A lot of cars at the Ford plant, but they're not driving around all over all the time. They go in, go out. They have the industrial and the resident or the retail type traffic separated. So that's the concern, is I think the provision of 25% is a standard provision in zoning ordinances, is to try to keep the retail traffic out of industrial areas.
Yeah, if you go down to like Riverside or the auto parts stores and stuff out there, warehouses, they use the little retail section where you go and pick up a part or whatever. That's pretty low traffic. If it was 20,000 square feet, I'd probably say another one more in and out.
Right.
So are we if we stay with the other one and not do the I-1, that keeps it to the 25% limitation?
Yes.
Yeah, if it stays in B3, then it's limited to 25% of a facility
And it
in the
has to stay
industrial.
out of the B4s, the downtown districts.
B1, B2, and B4 would be specific. It will not go in it no matter what in 1, 2, and 4 with either of the current iterations, because we've defined it that it only goes in B3 and I1, or it goes into only I1. So by the definition, it can't go into B1, B2, and currently can't go into B4 even if we do nothing. The drugstore portion is 1, 2, 3, not B4.
So from the patient perspective, from the patient perspective, are there regulations for accessibility, like ADA accessibility to
Yeah.
a pharmacy, to a retail shop versus to an industrial office?
No. The ADA guidelines require public accessibility for the,
No matter what kind
yeah,
of business?
yeah, yeah, yeah. At least to the public areas. If you've got a place and you're wanting customers come in, you have to make it ADA accessible. You don't have to make it ADA accessible if you've got a warehouse facility, because your customers aren't going into the warehouse. If they go to the front door, yes, ADA does it.
And the industrial, those are normally working bodies,
Right.
doing what they need to do.
Right.
Whereas with retail, you have to consider all different kinds of.
Mobility issues, yeah.
And people who are using medical marijuana, a lot of them have chronic or terminal illnesses, and they need to be thought of when they are trying to access their treatment.
And when I look at the B3 as opposed to residential currently, most of it on the north side, we don't have infrastructure there.
Right.
We don't have entrances, we don't have sewer, the stuff behind Eagle Heights, on W Highway, there's no sewer water. there's no road back there. It's
Yeah.
maybe 20, 30 years.
Is that the before?
No, that's B3. Downtown is the only B1.
And I apologize, I do not have in this room, because the new one isn't done yet, but I'm having made a new map close to that size that will have the December 31st, 2018 zoning districts on it in a colorized version so that you'll be able to see it. And I had it at the last meeting and I forgot to print them out for you to see at this meeting.
So what's B2?
B2 is light office and it allows retail as well. And
You're saying this can't go with B2?
Currently,
currently can. Drugstores can.
But the dispensary can.
Currently. Because it's, yeah.
And
Yeah. As long as you don't have the 1,000 feet.
Currently, it could go in B1 or B2
Or,
or B3.
yep.
what's the zoning on the east of property by Harvard being? Is that
B1.
Okay.
That's B1.
Yeah, that one, right, with the entrance still like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't do anything.
B1, yeah. It could get a dispensary. Because I don't know that there's a church around there. I know there's no daycare. There's no church within 1,000 feet. Yeah, no. Well, duh, I guess I can just look.
And that would get Harvard View,
Yeah.
Rollins Lane, and Great Hawk, and the lake entrance.
Yeah.
And that's why I really do want to do something other than B1 or B2. 'Cause
Mhm.
that property, a couple others we have that are in those types of areas.
So the rest of the B3s and neighborhoods is fairly low then.
Yeah, there's some of the W169.
there were several.
Yeah.
What you showed us last month, 60.
Yeah.
The south side.
The south side is where the B3 is going to be.
The south side is the majority, but I'm talking about the north side.
Yeah. Yeah, the south side's likely where we're going to have the big box stores
Well,
when they eventually come.
So as far as the dispensary and possible retail traffic, do we have any idea how much business one of these might do?
You know, love to be able to estimate it, but who knows how many cards they're going to issue? Who knows what the frequency's going to be?
And we can't use Colorado because they have recreational, so they're a different animal.
Are there any other states that are going to open?
There's
Yeah. I think there's only 12 that have recreational and 30 that have marijuana, but it's restricted. I think it's 18 have just medical, but they're all in the last few years, so nobody's got an industry. California and Colorado are the two biggest, but they're both recreational. So we.
I think to get the data, you probably get into HIPAA issues because you're looking at who has suppression, who has who has all the different things they're going to prescribe for, what the frequency is going to be, how much of a restriction you want. Some people might want 90 days, might want 30 days, might want a week.
There was a gentleman here last time, I thought he said that they were planning on opening a dispensary.
it was medicine shop, they owned the
Yeah,
building,
yeah.
and they were wanting to see about possibly putting there, but they're within 1,000 feet.
Right.
So,
And I thought I heard her give an estimate on what they expected to get.
That's the grow facility. They're looking at a cultivation. Yeah, that's a cultivation. Yeah.
He's also talking about they're going to Clinton County and his water estimate, one on that is 28,000 gallons a day.
Yeah. Yes.
well, if we put it in B3, and right now, we feel like if it went in B3, it'd probably go to the south end of town. Is that going to deter other businesses like big box stores or something coming into our town in the future? If it goes there and then keep them from coming to be decided,
That would be the argument. The question is, where would the big box stores be able to go? They're going to have the same principle in every community.
Yeah, I think they would probably do it as a trapper, since it's a prescribed regular pickup technically.
If we were talking recreational, I think there's a whole different scenario. But since recreational is still illegal, but when we get to that, and I fully suspect we're going to get there eventually, when we do, it's going to be a whole different game.
but will they be coming
We never know what we're going to see, get presented with. A lot of this,
But that's what this committee has to do,
Right.
is forward think a little bit.
sure.
You know, I understand, you know, the discussion and the concern with the I-1 and the traffic that could cause because you're doing retail where it should be this other industrial. But at the same time, I'm sitting there thinking, how's that any different at that intersection? Because it's I-1 versus a true commercial area along 169. You're gonna have the same traffic, retail, no matter where you put it on 169, so whether it's across from McDonald's. So I don't know that I can understand within the industrial district itself, of it being the wholesale and stuff. So to me, I'm not looking at the additional traffic going in and out of 169, because you're gonna have the home run go along there, and we have a big box store. I think we have to remove that element in our thought process.
But I
Eliminating
concern
it.
was how it will interact with the larger, more
Like I said,
industrial.
that's what I'm saying, I think you have to remove just the traffic itself on, when the comment was made about, you know, across from McDonald's and just additional traffic there. I understand the concern in the industrial park itself, that you don't want to retail in there. But we could look at that traffic somewhere else on 169 and still save the integrity of the industrial park, let's say, and not allow it in there. So then we wouldn't open ourselves to the possibility of a big box store going in. But if a Walmart went in where Marketplace was, we
Right.
still have the same thing.
Yeah, retail, you're going to have the
I
traffic.
think you have to
Yeah.
to me, I have to remove the traffic itself and look at the integrity of the industrial park versus going into B3.
Well, and I do look at the industrial, and I see that point in it. I guess I look at it in our city, though, we have very little industrial space at the I-1. So that limits a lot on both sides. It limits the availability for this, but it also limits, you know, we don't want to have space for a Ford Motor Company to come in here. You know, so, you know, are we going to have that large industrial plant here that it's going to affect? Yeah, kind of double-edged sword.
We have the geographic space, we just, right?
Yeah, the I-1 that's down there by, just north of the commercial interchange at 169, it's west of there, it's 57 plus acres.
Yeah, so we have the
So there is
space, we
space
just don't
there.
have.
Yeah,
This has
right.
been-
But you have to be in the backside of that to be able to do it, because you got the daycare right on the corner of commercial and 169. And you got a church in that same strip mall, but
And there's no
that,
road or, that's not developed at this point at all.
not yet. The commercial entrance, anyway, there's the Park Drive entrance, where you go across from Quick Trip. That entrance goes back in there, there's a road there. And they came in 2014 to this committee, that district did, and got preliminary plat approval for a road to the south to connect to commercial and all that. When commercial goes west a little further, which may be happening sooner than anyone may think.
If somebody did go at I-1 without a 25% restriction, and it was 10,000 square foot facility, would they trigger a traffic study? Because in front of Quick Trip, that's
Yeah, to be quite frank, any of them would, especially in this one, I would, because they're going to have to go through the site plan approval process, which is going to have the stormwater and all those other things. Yes, it will, because they're going to have to come up with some numbers to calculate, because there's nothing in the standard AASHTO guidelines what a medical marijuana facility generates in traffic. So you're going to have to assume some numbers they can pull from other facilities, you know, elsewhere. But yeah, they're going to have to do some kind of a study for us. I don't think we're going to have a scenario where it's, you know, a 60,000 square foot Walmart or 100,000 square foot Walmart kind of traffic. But that little facility may generate a lot, and ultimately, the benefit of the industrial districts, the roads are a little bigger, but there's a reason they're bigger. It's not to handle more traffic, it's to handle big traffic. So,
I can see with the restrictions on number of businesses allowed to do this, if they saw a 53-acre parcel where they could put in a 25,000 square foot facility that's all retail, why try to put in for 10 locations when you could put one big?
yeah, right. The last thing that no one's talked about, we talked about all of the impacts on it. 3 of the facilities have no sales tax impact for us. They are only property value, but they can be significant. One of them has sales tax, that's the dispensary, and it would be the only one, even though there's sales between facilities, by its own setup. The dispensaries have to buy it from a manufacturing facility, and the manufacturing has to buy it from a cultivation facility all here in Missouri. Those are non-taxable sales. It's only the dispensary to the ultimate sales. So that would be the additional funding as it relates to the rest of our comprehensive plan goals for everything else. That's where a dispensary has a much higher significance in impact to our bottom line as a community. Similar to the TIF project up on the hill. If you recall that discussion when it was going on, the sales tax portion of that is the driver, because that's where the money's generated.
Can you boil it down to say some pros and cons either way here? Keeping it at a B3 or having it in 5?
To be quite frank, I think you guys have done an excellent job of that. The question is, if it goes in B3, is what's it going to do to the residential that's kind of close? And then the other side is, if you don't allow it in B3, what's it going to do to the value of the I-1? Those are the 2 ways, if you read my staff report, you noted I mentioned that specifically. I don't get to vote on this, and I'm glad. You guys have the hard decision.
We don't have to either.
Yeah, well, yeah. But if you abstain, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Mr. Mayor, because I want to highlight, if we do nothing, they go in B1, B2, and B3.
And this is
Right.
like, to be honest,
Yeah.
this feels to me like, and I've read everything, and I've done some thinking and studying on this from outside these rooms, and it feels like a Hobbs choice to me. It's like, okay, what gets sacrificed to save something else? And I
When I look at it too, they can put a bar right by Clean Food too, that does the same, that some people view a bar being better, equal to, worse than, or better than what this is, right?
right.
We want the traffic like that, we want, fair driving, it's the same type of argument, right? You have fair driving, you have traffic, you have all the, we can drive your property.
I'm not against marijuana. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not against the dispensary at all. I'm more concerned about security since it is a cash business. That's what I don't like, is that it's a cash business. If it wasn't to, hey, come in with a credit card or something like that, that would be great, no cash on site. Then it doesn't become such a security issue to me. But it is a cash issue, and that really bothers me a lot. And it bothers me in B3, not just because of the neighborhoods, it bothers me because, okay, you've got maybe a small business next door to it, and it just, by being close to it, it puts them at risk too, in my thinking. But I could be wrong, so.
I think almost all of our current retail strip malls that have a church daycare in them or near them.
Yeah, I mean, we've got land, we don't have a lot of existing facilities, but
Yeah,
yeah.
you can like all the land. But if you look at it, Black McDonald's, that's a church and a daycare.
Okay.
If you go to Major Mall, he has a church in there. And a daycare like in Molly Square.
Yep.
If you go north of that,
You You go to Amory Road, yeah, you got the church behind it, Major Mall there, Hershey's, there's one in there. Behind the ones where Subway is,
The D3 pretty much have to build their own space.
yeah, I mean, there's very limited choices. Yeah, unless they buy the church that's obstructing.
Bottom line is, B3 areas are still relatively protected.
Right. And to be quite frank, that is in part by design, because we generally don't want B3s right on top of, if we can avoid it anyway, residential. You want to have them, you want to have to drive through the B3 to get to the residential, because you're leaving the biggest road, but yeah,
So.
yeah.
But the corner there of Harborview is B3, right?
No, that's B1, right.
And so Holdsworth is B1, right?
Holds
They're
worth.
right at the corner of 169 and 180. They've been trying to sell it.
Oh, yeah, no, there is no B up there. North of there, where the weight station is, that's all B.
So what is that? Because they had it zoned for commercial.
No, I think the comprehensive plan calls that intersection to have commercial at it. But it's ag now.
Because all the
They
grades
were trying to sell it as business.
Potential commercial, yeah. I think potential commercial, yeah. The comprehensive plan in place today calls that intersection as to have a commercial site at it, simple because it's got all the traffic.
So though when we're talking about where to go, because they're pretty limited in the malls we already have, and then you got the vacant B3 properties.
And they have to put that on their application.
Yeah. And most of those are south on 169.
There's several more.
Yeah, there's some up north.
But they're going to want traffic availability, and so, they're better bet. So
Yeah, I think our traffic study at the intersection of 92 and 169 is about 22,000 cars. Once we get to the W 169, that drops significantly too.
Yeah, it's 21, this was done in 2017. It's 21,000 at 92. It's 17 here, and at just south of W where they hit the measuring, it was 8,000.
and plus on the south side, they've got the double lane
Yeah.
highway.
And they've got water, and they've got,
Right.
They don't have sewer, all of it.
right, that's the other thing, right? You don't have sewer on a lot. Your property doesn't have sewer.
That's.
And they might not have that in the water supply, they're making 20,000 gallons a day.
Right. Yeah, if they're doing a grow facility, that will be such a strong conversation that we have. We have the ability to produce an additional 28,000 gallons a day, but ultimately, from our perspective,
Pumping it down to the south side.
yeah,
They
getting
can put in a dispensary though without sewer. I mean, they can use septic.
yeah, theoretically, yes. Depends on where they go. I mean, that's the deal. Ultimately, hopefully, we'll have sewers down there. Yeah.
I'm just thinking south.
Right. But as you look, that main line is 169. That's where all the churches and daycares are too. The only stuff that's of any substance off are mainly the schools. They're the ones farther away from 169. But the rest of that's churches and daycares.
That far south, where the Smithville entry sign is as well, there's no sewer, there's no water, and it's priced pretty significantly to be able to develop that. That's not good there.
Yeah.
It'd take a lot of money to develop that there versus going into a vacant property.
Right. And ultimately, I'm hearing a lot of rumble that the grow facilities are going to be, they're going to try to get out in the unincorporated county, either Clay or Platte. I mean, from my perspective, I'd rather have that kind of facility than any of the other, because the grow facility are the biggest buildings. That's the most property tax.
Big building, lots of high
Right.
technology.
Yep.
Automation.
Yep, a lot of costs to build them because they're going to have a lot of power usage, et cetera. Not a problem. Wherever they go here in Smithville, we got power galore. As you get south, you can see power lines everywhere. So.
Do you guys have done any research on kind of job opportunities, like will this generate a significant amount of jobs?
Depends on which use you're talking about.
Which facility?
Which facility? Yeah.
Dispensary or full-time?
My guess is the dispensary is going to be just like it, depending on how many square foot it is, it's going to be like any other facility. Yeah, maybe two or three clerks in it, and then
Cultivation facility, I would think that would require a little bit more.
yeah,
Cultivation and manufacturing for sure.
yeah. The manufacturing is likely going to have the scientific type folks because they're going to be doing chemical related stuff.
But a lot of it's so mature now with California being into this for a decade plus, it's highly automated.
Yeah,
So we see more property tax on machinery versus job creation.
right.
So on the dispensaries, can we, by ordinance, I don't want to do this only because it's a private business. So telling the business owner these many hours you can be open, can we do that?
Yeah, and I that is
Monday through
the
Friday?
right. And the plan for us is we can do that. We just don't know how far we can go. June 4th is when those operational regulations get released by the state. And they are 60 days before they can even start the issuance of a permit. So once those regs come out, that'll go directly to the Board of Aldermen for the business licensing.
That's why I kind of felt like hard for the courts, because there's guidelines that the state have to determine. And those guidelines may help us determine where we do or do not want to see that facility.
And
There is up in the calendar, because they're turning in applications. They have to have their site picked.
They have to have the site picked.
Yes.
they have to have the site in their application on June
We do
4th.
not make the change before then, they could pick the V1 location and we have no say.
Yeah.
We can always change
Then we get in the lawsuit.
We can change this later.
Yeah.
Once the trees come out, we can come back and change something.
And add it as an amendment.
Yeah, but the hours of operation, that would be a resolution of the board and type of business licenses.
Right.
We can do that.
Okay, now
So if they
that
were to
reminds me.
come, so if they were to come back and way out there, say they can be open 24 hours. I'm just
Right,
big
yes.
and we, by this recommendation here, we say, okay, it can go in B3, and then we send it to the board okays that. Then if they come back and say they can be open 24 hours, can we come back and amend then that they can only be in like B1?
No, cities have only the authority granted by the state, especially a fourth-class city. And if the state enters that legislative field, we can't enter as a city. We can't do anything more than what the,
No,
we can't.
Melissa's asking.
No.
If the board of aldermen passed this without the I-1 addition, and then the state says they can go in 24 hours, can we then do a change to this ordinance and say they don't allow that?
Oh, yeah, we could do that. Although, if somebody comes out with an application and gets it filed, then they have a vested interest in that property. Because here's the scenario. If we put it in today in our zoning, and the state came in later and said, no, they can be open whenever they want, our provision would become invalid ab initio. It just goes away because it's illegal. It violates the state law.
Because every municipality is so different.
Well, here's what I will tell you. The State Department of Senior Services, Health and Senior Services that's handling this is probably getting 10 or 15 emails a day from various entities, communities, and citizens that have concerns. Take care of this. Take care of that. What about this? Hours of operation of a retail facility in this scenario, I know has been presented. We saw a seminar, a teleconference seminar, where that issue was brought up at the seminar. And it was a televised one where there were folks talking about it. Several folks had that question. What about hours of operation? They're estimating that it's going to be reduced. It won't be a 24-hour deal because it's medical.
Okay, Ms.
I don't know, I
Natalie.
just feel like if I were a state lawmaker, I would want cities and municipalities to decide on those little details.
So, yep.
Those details, you know. as far as
Yep,
how-
sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Because this is a constitutional amendment, it has a little higher import. It goes that way. For example, and I'll give you an example of one. The 1,000 foot is in the amendment, 1,000 foot, but it gives cities the ability to make it tighter. But we can't say 2,000 feet,
Okay.
so we can reduce it to.
Usually 2 hours of operation, if they said they could be open 24 hours, if we said we only want them open 12 hours, can we do that?
No, because that would be a regulation. A state regulation trumps, we can only do what the state allows us, and if they enter the field of regulation, we can't do anything more than the state permits or prohibits, either way.
Okay, since you brought all of that up, we can abridge the state, but we can't change the zoning. What would be the problem with saying, okay, let's do it all in one? The industrial, and then if somebody comes back and says, yeah, well, I'd like to do it here, can we change something? And then come back and change it, because once
I mean, ultimately, we're going to know if there's a facility coming to Smithville or trying to come to Smithville on August 4th. We'll know. Because they have to put their address, the property, specifically in their application.
Okay, let me
That's
ask
the
you
problem.
this.
I mean, if we say B3 or I1, either one, these people now are going to put in their applications based on what we say. So therefore, they've got property picked out, which they have to put in their application. So then, if they come back and they get the application and then we go, yeah, we don't want you there, we want you over here. We can't do that. I mean, people have got a vested.
Well, we can do that, and interestingly enough, it's unfortunate, but that's what we're doing today. We are actually deciding where they can go.
Yeah, but
Whether it's-
before the fact, not after.
Right. And the reason, the way it's set up this way, is so that we're not basing it on anything other than the standards of what's the impact of B3, what's the impact of I1. It's not, I don't want it next to me, I don't want it next to my friend. It's B3, I1. It takes out that discriminatory provision.
And somebody could always come in and ask for rezoning and be here to I-1.
Sure.
So, all right.
Sure. The other aspect of it is, the worst part about this, and I mentioned it the last meeting, the amendment specifically says unreasonable burdens placed on them by the city.
Well, it's I-1 doesn't seem to be, you're the group here, and
Yeah.
I-1 doesn't seem to be an unreasonable burden. And if somebody wanted to come in and put something in a sweet spot B3, like you just said, they could always come back in and say, would you rezone this?
Yes, but if they're close to different things, I mean, doesn't there have to be a buffer there on some of that?
The industrial zoning would go to the regular standards of any rezoning. Number one, where does it fit into our comprehensive
So
plan?
it has to be the 8 standards.
Right. Right. And the first one is the comprehensive plan, and we have in our current comprehensive plan one basic area that would be the future industrial area of the community, and it's right where it is. We have other industrial zone land, but long-term, it's not intended to grow there, which is up there behind the library, or the old library. It's basically focused down there at the area where it's at. That was the intent.
Behind Sonic Commercial.
Yeah, yes, yes.
I just want
The
to
Park
make
Drive,
sure.
yeah, the Park Drive entrance.
Further west they would go there, understand.
Yeah, they can't go much further than, well, that parcel, they can't even go to the end of that parcel because it goes down a steep hill to the river. But,
And Johnson.
Don't go to
yeah, yeah. So ultimately, the discussion seems like we're fairly where we are. Sitting on the table is a motion and a second for the original ordinance. If somebody wants to amend it, then you need to make a motion to amend. And I've indicated in there how you'd go about that, and that would be a motion to amend it to alternate option on the bottom of it, and that would allow the change. There'd have to be a second and a vote on the amendment, and then you come back and vote on the main motion as amended. So there'd be two votes. If, as the mayor indicated, if that amendment doesn't get a second, then it fails, and the main motion gets brought to, for a vote at that point. Main motion being B3I1 combo.
Is there anything that I feel that there's anything else that could be brought to the table that we're not thinking of or looking at or whatever, that we don't feel like we have the information to make the decision? If not, then I think we need to.
The other items, I can tell you a whole bunch of them, but most of them are outside the purview of zoning. It's what's the impact on sewers? That's going to be the board. What's the impact on the water? That's going to be the board. Those are the two primary ones.
Those are usually with the bigger facilities, which is
Yeah.
the manufacturing and all that.
Yeah.
We already know that. We've pretty much indicated those are I-1.
Yep. But those other, right. Those other issues are out there, but most of the other issues are handled by the board.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, that's really the only question.
Yes,
Where do we
that's
put
the
it?
question that's on the table. Where do we put the dispensaries? The motion on the table, as
Yeah.
Jack indicated, is like it is written, that we go in number 7 on B3. So therefore, it would no longer be able to go into B1 or B2 or B4, or it could no longer go into I-1.
No, it could go in, yeah.
Unless it was 25% of a manufacturing facility.
It could be 5%. Very good explanation.
With that, do you all feel ready to make a vote on the motion on the table? And the motion on the table is added to the B3 definition. Unless somebody wants to make the amendment to do the alternate. I'll ask you all kids. Thank you. Now, I guess my question is, if we do not have a full vote, and if it's a divided, then it.
The board gets that recommendation.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, like I said, we've got at least 2 more readings of this to the board.
And the heat level will rise and ebb and flow on it too.
Before we do then a vote on amendment, can we do like, is it permissible to do a straw vote?
No. No.
Yeah, I mean, because I'd be interested in knowing what somebody else's feelings are.
Well, there is a way to do it, and it would be to make a motion to amend and see if you get a second. And if you get a second, then you vote on whether it's amended. Then it goes back for a vote on the amended. Or if the motion fails on the amended,
You know what, I'm going to do it just to see what happens. I want to amend it to put a medical marijuana dispensary in on it. I'm going to change the
alternate option? The alternate option?
alternate option.
Okay.
Alternate option.
So,
We have an amendment on the table to.
a motion, right. We have a motion to amend.
A motion to.
There needs to be a second.
Do I have a second for the alternate option amendment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, you have a motion and a second. Guess what? You open that motion and amendment up for discussion.
We have discussion.
Yeah, you may have already had the discussion, but now there's discussion on the amendment.
Is there any further discussion on the alternate option?
I think we all listened to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to call for a vote
Yep.
on the amendment to put it into the alternate option of putting it in Iowa.
Sure.
So,
I'll do a roll call vote.
roll call, please.
And this form that I got from Brandy and Linda doesn't have this extra stuff, so I'm doing some writing. So I will make the call. So I'll start with Trenda, Rand, Shirley, sorry, I'm writing down names next to all the votes too, so it's taking me a while. Mayor Bowie, Deb,
I'm going to abstain.
and Alderman Wilson. Well, guess what? We get one of those funnies. We have 3 noes, 2 yeses, and an abstain. The motion fails. Did I say it's 3 noes, 2 yeses, and an abstain? The motion fails. So now we're back to the original motion.
See, Deb, if you said it, I'd been had a 3 and 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know.
No, well, interestingly enough, in that scenario, the motion would fail.
It would fail. because
Yes, yes,
It was a tie.
yes.
That sounds very bad.
Yeah.
So it fails.
Yeah. So now we're back to the original motion to B3, I1 combo as drafted without the alternate option language on the back of the ordinance. And whenever, yeah. Madam Chairman, if you want to close the discussion and call for a vote.
Yes, close the discussion.
Okay.
Call for the vote on the motion on the floor for the medical marijuana to be in B3 as written.
Okay, everybody got that? Okay, we're going to go the other direction. Once I make sure my notes are clear. So we'll start with Alderman Wilson. Deb.
Aye.
Mayor Boley. Shirley, sorry. Rand.
No.
Trenda. Sorry, I misspelled I by spelling it yes. So it, and then so it's 1, 2, 3, 4 to 2. It will go to the Board of Aldermen with a recommendation of adopting the draft ordinance here. It'll be on the next week from today, the first. Yeah, there may be a tie vote there. We'll have to see. So it's 4 to. Okay.
Okay, here's my agenda.
Yeah.
That is public comment.
Yeah.
We will move on. First off, thank you all for all the input. I know this is a difficult one, and I'm torn also, to be quite honest. I'm torn between a lot of this too. So, and I know that this goes to the board, and I know they have a big decision, and they'll get a lot more public input. I think some more public input on our part might have been good, but yet I'm kind of
question and to sit here and discuss it without the
Added pressures.
added pressure, yes, thank you. So, but thank you all for your time and putting into it tonight. I do appreciate it. So, we all do. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, you're adjourned.
8:22. I hope Brandy can read my writing on her notes.
Is it recorded like something?
Yes. Well, we got two recorders. We have the sound version.
Well, the tape recorder, because
Yeah.
you see that live, and
Yeah. Yeah, we've got them both.